Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And we're approaching the end of the month of November now, and we're going to talk about names, okay? If you meet Westerners, of course, they'll have a first name and a last name, like Joe Johnson or something like that. But maybe you didn't know this. A lot of Westerners, especially Americans, will have a middle name that they don't really use. It's going to be on their passport and stuff like that, but they don't actually use it that much unless they want to. Some people do because it sounds better to use both their first name or their middle name.
Or they choose to go by their middle name, not their first name.
Yeah, I've known some people who preferred their middle name because they didn't like their first name.
Right.
Like I knew a guy whose first name was Gordon, and he didn't really like that, so he uses his middle name, which is Keith, and people like to use that name better. He likes to use that word better, but my middle name is James, which isn't really that much different than Tom, so I just go ahead and use Tom. Most people use the first name. It's very rare you hear people use their middle name as their well, you can't say it's their first name, the name they go by. Let's say that.
The name they go by. Yeah, that's what we would say. I know quite a few that go by their middle name. Sometimes it's because their dad or their mom has the same first name, and they want to differentiate between, the parent or the grandparent and the child. So they'll start calling their kid by their middle name. Just depends. My middle name is... I just would always say to Mom, it's kind of a waste of space. My name is Stephanie, and my middle name is Anne, which I always thought was kind of funny because I have an Anne kind of in my first name already. But now I understand why she wanted me to be an Anne because of her own name. But yeah, Stephanie Anne. I don't use my middle name hardly ever. But I have a younger sister who always uses her middle name because it's my mom's first name, and she just is so proud that she has my mom's first name. So it depends on people. We're going to talk about some of the reasons why people have middle names, and you'll be surprised to hear about some of these things, I'm sure. But it's very interesting to learn about the history behind middle names. Let's get started. Tom's going to read through today's article.
Names are often special, filled with a sentiment or ambition. They might provide a link to an unusual family history, as in the case of the American author Edgar Allan Poe. Though his parents named him simply Edgar Poe, when they left him an orphan, he was taken in by the Allens. Poe memorialized this connection by adding their name to his own. But names are tools, too. After all, without personal names, we'd be obliged to nudge people for their attention or simply call them, "Hey you." Middle names and surnames began as an extension of this concept. Many villages had a Mary. There was probably even more than one Mary who brewed beer. With so many Mary brewers around, how could you know you were referring to the right one? You might just describe the Mary in question, but if you were fortunate, her parents had given her a middle name. Frequently, too, middle names granted a child a meaningful name from the family's history, in addition to the name of a protective saint. Among European aristocratic classes, there was another motivation: vanity. The nobility set themselves apart by giving their children long names to indicate their wealth and history. Even today, some of the most impressive arrays of middle names belong to royalty. The full name of Spain's current king is Felipe Juan Pablo Alfonso de Todos los Santos de Borbón y Grecia. Today, exciting, exotic, or just plain absurd middle names are not restricted to noble families. Anyone can give their infant a name inspired by myth, legend, or history. Even modern stories have led to waves of fanciful names like Daenerys and Khaleesi from the fantasy drama Game of Thrones. However, a parent's name choice for their child is not permanent. As Edgar Allan Poe demonstrates, names are as mutable as their owner wants them to be.
Let's jump in, guys. It's our history unit, which is always interesting, I think. I love history. This one is entitled, What's in a Middle Name? What's in a name is a famous line from a Shakespeare play. So we're just kind of taking our own, or getting our own take on this. Our author is kind of clever here, coming up with this title, What's in a Middle Name? So what's in a name? What does it stand for? What kind of importance does it have? Names are often special, I think, depending on who you're talking to. In my family, several of my brothers and sisters have names, middle names especially after grandparents, or even their own parent. My brother, his middle name is my dad's first name. So names are often special or tied to family members, or, it says here, filled with sentiment or ambition. Sentiment refers to feelings. So sometimes we're given names because someone feels especially proud or close to someone with that name, and they want to have that name passed down to somebody else so they'll continue to remember that particular person. So sentiment is kind of a formal word, but we usually see it in writing more than in speech. Sometimes people just use the word feeling rather than sentiment if they're speaking. But yeah, it's filled with feeling. There's a lot of feelings involved with how some people are given their names. Tom, I want to ask you, James, is it a name that is from someone in your family?
I would guess so, because my grandfather's name was James.
There you go.
And he died in a car crash a week before I was born, so I never actually met him.
Oh, so it is for him.
I don't think I actually asked my mother if that's the reason my middle name is James, but I can't think of any other reason.
You never asked? Really?
Maybe I did when I was a kid. I don't know, but in any case, yeah, James, of course, was the name of my grandfather, who passed away about the time I was born there.
That's sad.
So that's the family history there, I suppose.
Sure.
That's a reason why people have middle names for certain reasons, because they might provide a link to an unusual family history, as in the case of the American author Edgar Allan Poe. So we'll talk about his story now. Indeed, there's Allan there. I guess that's his middle name there. Some authors use their middle name, some don't. I guess you can sound pretty significant if you use it, like J.K. Rowling, for example. That's not her name, but the K is the initial for her middle name. But she could be just J. Rowling, but J.K. Rowling, I guess, sounds more sellable. You can sell more books that way.
A lot of people who are in the public eye, celebrities, it could be like Tom just mentioned, somebody who writes is famous for that. They will use all three names, or sometimes even more. So it just depends. It says here about Edgar Allan Poe, and we all know him as Edgar Allan Poe. Nobody says Edgar Poe. Nobody calls him that. You have to say all three names. It says here, though his parents named him simply Edgar Poe, that was his name at birth. When they left him an orphan, both his parents passed away, so he was alone. He was taken in by a family called the Allens. That was their last name, Allen. So when you're taken in, usually it's somebody who lets you stay in their house because you have nowhere else to go or nowhere else to stay. We often will take in orphans, or take in homeless, or take in people who are in need of help. You can also take in stray animals. Maybe you found a cat on the street that you want to take in and take care of. You would take in that stray animal. Here he was taken in by some kind people whose last name was Allen.
Take in also means you're going to enjoy something. Like last Saturday, we took in a movie. We went to the theater and saw a movie. But in this particular case, we could say that he was adopted by the Allens. And here it says Poe memorialized this connection by adding their name to his own. So here we've got the word memorialized. That is not the same as to memorize. That's what you do before a test. You try to memorize vocabulary words or math formulas and stuff like that. You commit them to memory, but this is slightly different here. To memorialize something means to pay tribute to something. That's what happens sometimes if there's a hero or something and you want to build a monument to commemorate that hero. You memorialize that person by having a monument built so that everybody will remember the great sacrifice that that person made for the country.
Now, this is the verb to memorialize somebody. But what you often will do is have maybe a statue created or something like that. That's a memorial. Sometimes when people pass away, their families will have, in addition to a funeral service, they'll have a memorial service. We had a memorial service for a friend of mine who passed away because a lot of her friends lived in a different city than her family, and people wanted to remember that person, to memorialize someone. So he must have loved the Allens who took him in and raised him as their own because he wanted to memorialize their connection to him by adding their name to his own. But names are tools, too. After all, without personal names, we'd be obliged to nudge people for their attention or simply call them, "Hey, you," which is sometimes what we have to do when we don't know someone's name. Now, if you are obliged to do something, it just means you have some sort of duty to do it. Maybe you're in an awkward situation and you feel like there's something you need to be doing. You're obliged to do something because of the situation, maybe because of a law. But here, we'd be obliged to just like kind of gently touch people. That's what a nudge is, to push someone gently, usually with your elbow or maybe with your little finger, touch their shoulder. Nudge someone just to get their attention. If you don't know someone's name, what do? Hey, you over there. It can be kind of embarrassing. We're going to talk more about middle names, guys, but right now we're going to listen to our Chinese teacher.
大家好，我是派老师。今天讲解的是11月份 Unit 15 What's in the middle name？ 这是一份篇章结构的练习题，文章介绍西方人的名字，他们的 middle name 中间的那个名字。好，我们一起先解题吧。在开始解题前，老师想跟大家强调，答题之前，请先看一下4个选项，心中要有个印象，可以用哪些句子让文章变得更完整。接下来第2步，篇章结构最重要的就是要把填回去的句子跟前后文的串起来，串起来呢要前后文连贯，在文意概念上还要承先启后。所以请大家记得老师给你们的口诀，总共有8个字，前后连贯，文意通顺，带着这个原则来答题，任何的难题都难不了你的。好，我们现在一起解第一题。第一段这里提到名字是后代子孙和过去家族历史的连结，而且作者用美国知名作家 Alan Poe 来当作例子。原本他的爸爸妈妈给他的名字只有 Edgar Poe， 但因为爸爸妈妈离世，所以呢他就变成了孤儿，所幸Alan 家收养他，有个家庭呢，他们叫 Alan。那收养了他以后，我们知道说，这个美国的伟大的作家，其实他蛮懂得知恩图报的。为了感念他们，他把 Alan 加到名字里面，成为 middle name。再来，我们看第一题前一句 ，But names are tools too。但名字也是工具。好。既然是工具，就表示实用性很重要，所以第一题选 B。 好，这句话的意思是什么？毕竟如果没有个人名字，我们将被迫用手肘去轻推别人，引起他们注意，或者干脆叫他们 Hey, you。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Let us now continue with our lesson for today. We're talking about middle names. What's in a name? Well, what's in a middle name? And again, we talked about reasons why people have middle names. They might provide a link to some family history. Like Edgar Allan Poe, he liked his adoptive family so much that he used their surname as his middle name. And then, of course, you can have other reasons why you have a middle name as well, or why you are given one. Like I said before, I was given the middle name James because my grandfather passed away around the time I was born. So I guess his name lives on with me. But
yes.
I've never used my middle name as the name I go by because, as I said, it basically sounds about the same as Tom. Tom, James, whatever.
No, it doesn't. They're completely different.
I've tried to adopt Tommy James or TJ or
That's
something
cute.
like that, but
yeah.
Those just don't work. I still
TJ
just
is
go
kind
by
of popular,
Tom.
though. I've heard other people use those initials TJ.
Yeah, maybe it's too common. Maybe that's why I don't use that. I don't know. But in any case, those are some reasons why people have middle names. Of course, the middle names mostly are given to you by your parents, although in the U.S. and probably in some other countries, you can legally change your name if you want to. If you don't like your middle name or your first name or your last name for that matter, you can change it. I know
we have a friend here in Taiwan, Tom, that changed her name.
Oh, it's quite common here. I've heard that people will talk to the fortune teller or something.
Oh, I see.
And they'll say, well, your name, isn't really conducive to making a lot of money in the future. You should change your name to this, and then you'll have a successful career if you do that. I think we all know people who have changed their names for that very reason, or maybe other reasons. But yeah, you don't really have middle names here like we do. So let's continue to talk about middle names. As we continue here in the next paragraph, it says middle names and surnames began as an extension of this concept. And that's the concept of just how do you refer to somebody?
Yeah.
What do you call them? And just saying, hey, you, hey, bud, hey, Buster, come over here. I want to talk to you. It's better if you know their name. We should mention a surname is your family name, like President Tsai. Her surname, of course, is Tsai.
Yeah, so here's the concept. Many villages had a Mary. Mary was a very common name, especially in the Middle Ages. The 1400s, 1500s. Mary was just very, very common, probably because there were nobility that had that name Mary. So what would you do if you had a village full of all these Marys? How would you differentiate between the Marys? How would you know which one people were referring to or talking about? There was probably even more than one Mary who brewed beer. We know from history that a lot of people's last names came from their occupations. So if you brewed beer, you probably ended up with a name at some point that was Brewers. Brewers. I had a friend named Brewer, actually, just Brewer, not Brewers. So more than one Mary who was actually making beer, that's what to brew beer means. With so many Mary brewers around, how could you know you were referring to the right one? How could people know that you were both talking about the same Mary? So you might just describe the Mary in question, but if you were fortunate, her parents gave her a middle name, and then you could just put those two names together, the first and the middle name, and people would know, oh, I know who you're talking about now. And so that's one of the reasons why people began to have middle names, is just to tell the different people apart from each other.
In my high school class, we had two Tim Johnsons.
There you go.
And how we told them apart, or how we were able to differentiate between them was, one was TJ, Tim J. Johnson, and the other one was Tim P. Johnson. Tim Joel Johnson and Tim Paul Johnson. We just used their middle initial. Are you talking about Tim J. Johnson or Tim P. Johnson? But again, we've got this example of Mary Brewer. How can you tell all these different Mary Brewers apart, so that's why she was given a middle name. Mary Frances Brewer, maybe, as opposed to Mary Lisa Brewer. You get the idea. And frequently, too, middle names granted a child a meaningful name from the family's history, in addition to the name of a protective saint. So, yeah, you could get a name from your family's history. Like me, my middle name is my grandfather's first name. I guess that's an example there. But also, you might have a middle name as being the name of a protective saint. I guess if you're religious, Catholic or something, you could use your middle name like, what saints are there? Like St. Paul or something like that.
Well, you just mentioned one. You said Mary Frances. Frances was a Catholic saint. Now, there are also European aristocratic classes. Those are the high social classes, the nobility. There was another motivation for giving themselves middle names. It was vanity. Vanity refers to having a lot of pride, maybe too much pride in yourself, so that you're always thinking about yourself, especially your appearance. Celebrities are very vain. They have a lot of vanity. Vanity is a noun. Vain would be the adjective form. The nobility, those were the nobles, set themselves apart by giving their children long names to indicate their wealth and history. Tom, as he was reading the article, read a name of Spain's current king. He has an awfully long name, doesn't he?
Yep, it's all in Spanish there. Felipe Juan Pablo Alfonso de Todos los Santos de Borbón y Grecia. I hope I said that right, but that is a mouthful there. And, of course, you can expect lots of other kings and queens and princes and princesses to have similar names. Now, in the final paragraph here, it says, Today, exciting, exotic, or just plain absurd middle names are not restricted to noble families. So, exotic just means kind of unusual or strange. You might know somebody with a rather unusual middle name that does not sound like Lisa or Mary or John or Paul or something like that. And they could be just absurd. What if you had a middle name that was, my middle name is Caterpillar, or my middle name is Apple, or something like that? That would be absurd, which means kind of silly, ridiculous.
Well, we know Gwyneth Paltrow named her daughter Apple.
Well, that's the first name there.
That's exactly absurd. Yeah, it wasn't a middle name. It was her first name, poor girl.
Yeah, what a dumb name. So
absurd just means really stupid, silly, ridiculous, something that people can laugh at and make fun of. I remember watching a show and they were talking about weird names. And one guy, his last name was Smith, very, very normal. His parents had named him I for his first name and Lash for his middle name, which is just stupid. That's absurd. Parents wanting just to laugh, I guess, at something. Don't do that to your kids, guys. So if you're talking about restricted, things that are restricted to noble families, those are those really long names. A noble family is just those families that belong to the aristocracy. They were born into an exalted class, a high-ranking class. We don't have that in America, but they do have nobility over there in Europe. That's why America left, and we fought for our freedom. We wanted to be just equal people. So anyone can give their infant a name inspired by myth, legend, or history. We know that nowadays people are starting to use names from popular TV dramas to give to their kids, like Daenerys and Khaleesi. These are names that are actually showing up on current modern-day kids because their parents just loved the show Game of Thrones.
Right, or maybe people here in Taiwan give their kids names from COG or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah.
However, a parent's name choice for their child is not permanent. As Edgar Allan Poe demonstrates, names are as mutable as their owner wants them to be. So mutable means changeable, and I guess you can legally change your name if you want to, including your middle name.
True. Okay, guys, one more time. We're going to listen to our Chinese teacher, and then we'll be back to say goodbye.
第一段说明了姓名的实用价值，帮助我们称呼不同的人。接着，请大家看第二题。前一个句子是 With so many Mary Brewers around, how could you know you were referring to the right one? 有这么多玛丽布鲁尔，你怎么知道你指称的是对的人？ 我们运用篇章结构的解题口诀，前后连贯，文意通顺，选择一个也有 Mary 的句子。第二题选 D。You might just describe the Mary in question, but if you were fortunate, her parents had given her a middle name. 你只好描述一下自己提到的这个 Mary 是什么样子，或有哪些特征。但如果你够幸运，她的爸爸妈妈帮她取 middle name， 那这些问题不就迎刃而解了吗？接着第三题，请看前一句 Among European aristocratic classes.There was another motivation, vanity. 在欧洲贵族阶层中，还有另一个动机，虚荣心。而后一句 Even today, some of the most impressive arrays of middle names belong to royalty. 即使到今天，一些最令人印象深刻的一长串中间名，即使也属于皇室成员。我们同样运用篇章结构的解题口诀，前后连贯，文意通顺，选择一个提到贵族的句子。第三题选 A。The nobility set themselves apart by giving their children long names to indicate their wealth and history. 贵族为了与众不同，帮孩子取很长的名字，乐乐等。为什么要这样子啊？要表明家族家里很有钱，而且呢是就是历史传承。很了不起的。最后第四题承接前一段，提到现在不只是贵族，一般人也可以帮孩子取一些有典故的名字哦。第四题前一句 Anyone can give their infant a name inspired by myth, legend, or history. 这句话什么意思？任何人都可以帮自己的小 baby 取名字，取的时候可以参考神话、传说或历史，延续同样的概念。第四题我们选 C。Even modern stories have led to waves of fanciful names like blah 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 blah. 那就是呢，我们知道有个奇幻剧很有名，那这些里面的人物呢，也变成是爸爸妈妈帮小孩取名字的时候所参考的。以上呢，就是我们针对今天这个篇章结构所做的中文讲解，希望同学都能够把握我们的解题技巧。我再次提醒同学，做篇章结构的时候，先把选项看清楚，然后要记住解题的时候运用我们的口诀，前后连贯，文意通顺。好，谢谢大家，我们下个月再见。
That's it for today, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us, and please join us again next time for another edition of our program. And think things through carefully when you name your children in English. Don't give them a dumb name like Moon Unit 1 or Dweezil or something like that, like Frank Zappa did to his kids. Okay, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.